Well, welcome back, everyone. All in all, a very fun little night. I don't know if you guys managed to get out, but this is kind of where we ended up. Obviously, everyone saw that I ended up with the Maestros. That was not by design. Unfortunately, the game store that I went to didn't allow you to pick your own houses, so I kind of got just stuck with a random house, which ended up being my least favorite of all the houses. But I made it work. I forced myself into Jund. I shouldn't say forced. It was fairly easy to slip in a Jund based on what I opened. Good thing that there was a lot of overlap with the Maestro Red Black with the Jund or Riveteer house, as they say nowadays. But this is where we ended up. This is kind of the build that I ended up with by the end of the night. It was a fairly late night, so there was only 3 rounds. So this deck unfortunately only went 1-1 in the last round when it extra turns, and we ended up just drawing with that one as well. So 1-1-1, it was mediocre, but it fought well. It had a good fight, especially not starting with the correct house in the first place. But it was a fun deck. It was very aggressive. I went up against a Cabaretti deck with the tokens, as well as a secondary Cabaretti deck that went with the tokens. And then lastly, I ended up playing a Broker's deck, which was very, how do you say, stally, which ended up leading to extra turns. But I'd say the best part of the night was actually just my pulls. Ending up with an Urabrask Phyrexian text was actually a pretty good pull. And then Luxior, I don't know if you saw that as well before, was one of my top picks. But overall, a pretty good set of pulls and a good fun night. Me and my buddy went down to our local game store. Hopefully you guys did too. So let's run through this quick, kind of what our build looked like going through the night. The creatures I ended up with were fairly not too bad. Goldhound is one of our 1-drops. Unlucky Witness actually ended up being pretty good for card draw in the long game. Even drawing him late game and using him as a blocker to get some extra cards was actually quite decent. Civic Gardener, just an all-around solid little 2-drop. Crooked Custodian, again, just a beefcake. Ended up with a couple of those. Again, 2 Attended Socialites. These guys were actually pretty darn good. There was enough creatures entering the battlefield every turn to where these guys ended up being 3/2s as is. With the option of just having a couple more tokens enter in sometimes, he ended up being pretty darn strong and a good guy to swing with on turn 3 usually. Everybody's favorite Jewel Thief. There's nothing to say here. He's pretty darn good, especially at a common. Come on. So a 3/3 Vigilance Trample gives you a treasure 3-drop. He does it all. He was pretty amazing. This guy ended up being pretty good too. Again, there was enough creatures to where just minor whittling away on your opponent, let alone just being a power of 3 and 2 toughness, actually ended up being a pretty good little threat. Social Climber, she was okay, kind of an opposite of the witty dude here, but the life gain was nice, nothing too crazy. It was just a good solid 3-drop for mid-range. Crew Captain actually ended up being pretty solid. If I could get my land on turns or on curve, he was a beast to reckon with. And then some of our bigger 5-drops here that we were dealing with, Wrecking Crew, just a tank, and then as well as Pugnacious Pugilist, I think I'm saying it right. Again, just a beast, and then also being able to create a 1/1 to trigger some of these other alliance creatures was actually pretty fun. So these guys were pretty amazing. It lent itself to a pretty darn good deck. Sadly, the entire night I did not once get to play Urabrask. So I don't know. The jury's still out on this guy. I think just as a base 4/4 haste for 5 is good enough. But he, especially in a limited format, his ability really didn't come into play too often. Again, I wouldn't know because I didn't actually get to play him, but he was still a good guy. He was still a solid 5-drop to have in the deck. Shakedown Heavy, he is a tank. A 3-drop 6/4 menace. The problem is that they were more often than not very willing to let you draw a card. which is good on the back end to let you draw a card. You still get a blocker in the back end. So he did his purpose, but I never actually got a chance to get damage through with him. They were always willing to let me draw a card. But he was a good solid threat as a turn 3 and also ongoing card draw. So I guess he did his purpose. Just sucks that the 6/4 really didn't really get to do much. And then when we got to my last round, I debated going 4-color the entire night. And for the last round, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna dip into blue. I had one land in there, one island in there. This card ended up being very useful. And getting to 4 mana, especially as having a splash of blue, actually was not that hard. There was enough treasure and a lot of these exile, make your lands tap for 3 colors dudes that made this very easy to play. There was no circumstance where I got stuck with this in hand that I couldn't make it happen. The 3 damage to everybody wasn't great, but it had its purpose, and it came in very handy in the one game that I did get to play it. So not too bad reaching for. When we talk about our instants and sorceries, this is kind of what led me down the Riveteer path. I do end up liking these guys a lot, especially in a limited format. Not only getting a treasure on the back end, especially in a multicolored format, as a surprise trade block, get your creature back kind of kill card, or just to get more damage through card. These guys, especially in the limited format, I see these as kind of a removal spell, and it ended up being very, very useful. Prize fight, again, just 2 target creatures fight, create a treasure token. At instant speed, fantastic little card, came in very useful. Bouncer's Beatdown, just more damage. Again, works really well with the Shakedown Heavy. Got a lot of damage flying around there. More removal. Ended up with 2 murders. That kind of pushed me down this path. Destroy 2 target creatures. Riveteer's Charm came in very, very useful. More so for the getting rid of the bigger creature deal, this first one here. Warm Welcome, actually very surprisingly useful card. It's instant speed. I think a lot of people miss that, but being able to look at the top 5 of your cards and just put a creature in a play, but a surprise blocker, very useful. This thing came in very handy. I don't know if it'll see as much play in draft, but for me, it came in very useful multiple times. And then these 2 little buggers, I just love these guys. Anything that comes in for the 2 mana to turn your land into something, but later get to make a bigger creature. These were kind of my bigger drops, and in the early game, they're just 2 drops, fix your mana. Very useful. I found out halfway through the night that you can use this guy to tap a land to produce one of your off colors. So I felt more comfortable running a blue as well, because later I can tap this to actually add a blue to then play him. So these 2 actually worked out really well. I ended up with a ton of these dudes, but I felt more comfortable in Jund than I did in the Maestro's colors. So that was kind of the build. Again, went 1-1-1. It was a fun night. It was solid. It put up a good fight. The one Cabaretti build just had a really solid line of tokens. Couldn't really beat them. But I did go 2-0 against the other Cabaretti, and then the last one against the Brokers just ended up being a stall match. But we went 1-1 with that match as well. So, very fun. The lands did help as well. We ended up with getting 3 fairly useful Evolving Wildlands, at least to either get a black or a blue, again, a black or blue, or black or red, or again, just a green and a blue once I started going for that 4th color. So these guys ended up very useful. And then for our dual color lands, 2 double blacks and a double green. Again, this helped a ton. Having this kind of mana range to work with, this kind of mana fixing, made the deck building pretty easy, actually. I will say that there was a couple cards that almost made the list that really just didn't cut it compared to the other cards that were out there. This dude having reach and a 2/3 was fine for 3 mana, but the 3 spot for me was getting a little overstocked. This was on the back burner. It's kind of sometimes turns into like a win con out of nowhere type of thing. But again, it just didn't feel useful enough to me, so I left it out. 2 mana. This guy I probably could have played a little more, but I just did not feel the need to put in another 2-drop compared to the other ones that were in there. But I do like the Death Touch. That's why he was right on the edge. Grizzly Sigil. I tried playing with this for a couple games. It just ended up not being as useful as I thought it would be. It's hard to get damage onto something and then expect to get 3 more damage on top of it. So I ended up taking this out. It just wasn't as reliable as I wanted. 1-drop Cutthroat Contender. He's good. He's fine. He'll swing in for a 2/1 for some life, but I had some other better 1-drops. Just didn't feel it was necessary to lean on that guy. And then Graveyard Shift I had as a backup. And I wanted to see if I was able to get my graveyard full enough to make use of this. 5 mana to pull back a creature is a bit, and the creatures I was pulling back wasn't great, so I ended up leaving this out as well. So those are some of the ones that didn't make the cut. Now, based on my rares, I will say I did heavily consider, I kind of ran out of time to kind of lean on this, but I did heavily consider going Brokers or Bant for you old players, but at the white creatures and the blue creatures were just not there enough to make me lean that way, and I felt more comfortable with some of my black cards from that deck. So this, I wish I had more time to try this out, but I think the Brokers build would have been really fun. Brokers Ascendancy is just a beefcake of a card. Depopulate. Any board wipe in a limited format, for me, is amazing. Especially when they think that they're getting ahead on you, and they try and put the gas on a little more, and they put more creatures into play. But you have this guy in hand, and it resets the board and completely shifts the game where it's at currently. So I would have loved to have played with this. Rabble Rousing long term just creates more creatures. I love this thing. Again, I wish I would have had time to play with this and try it out more, but I just didn't find enough creatures to actually play with and feel comfortable with, that they were strong. Case of Joint, just more card draw. Just a 1-drop in blue that I had an option for. 2-drop, I had Defender. That didn't make me too happy. Broker's Veteran, 2/1, fine. More white. I don't know. It just, some of the creatures didn't feel great. I would have probably leaned on these guys to try and get them in later game. But 7 mana is a lot of mana, so I didn't feel comfortable with that. White removal. Little Chat is more card draw. This guy was fun, but again, it was too tricksy for not enough payoff. 4 mana for a 3/2 that eventually gets bigger, fine. 5 mana for a 3/3 flyer that just gains life, that guy's fine. Good. It didn't offer enough strength to me to feel comfortable going into. Granted, again, we would have had green cards in here as well, but again, overall, I felt more comfortable with the removal and the creature base in our Jund build than what I would have in the Brokers build, but it still would have been fun to try this, just didn't have time. And then lastly, these are the cards that just didn't make the cut for me. I'm just gonna fly through them. They were good cards, especially these guys almost made the top of the list, but they, especially in the build that I had, just did not, for the mana cost or for compared to some of the other parts in those curves, just did not work out for me and did not feel comfortable in those builds. So again, Jund was a solid build. There was a lot of good options for it. It just felt more comfortable, and also I went into the night expecting to play that anyways. So that's kind of what the build I was looking for in the first place. But well, that was a good cut. But overall, a fun night. I hope you guys got to get out there too and try your hand at some of this. Hopefully you guys didn't get stuck with Maestros unless you wanted to, then congratulations. But hopefully you got out to your game stores. And I guess we'll look for you guys on Arena. Until next time, though, thanks for swinging by. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll see you in the next video. See you guys.